About 8,000 years ago, humanity experienced one of the most mysterious and devastating events in the entire history of evolution, a silent turning point that caused 90% of men to disappear from the timeline. It was not war, not disease, not a natural disaster. Rather, it was a mechanism of selection, persistent, quiet, yet powerful enough to erase nearly all male lineages across the earth. And the most unsettling part is this. Its origins lay within the very social systems that humans had built at the time. In this video, we will unlock a secret that has been buried within the human genome for millennia. You will see how women, through choices that seemed personal, unwittingly became the force that shaped the course of all humanity. You will understand how wealth, power, competition among clans, and invisible selection combined to create a purge so profound that science still shudders at its implications today. If you are ready to explore the truth behind the most mysterious biological and social event ever to affect men, then let us begin this journey. This is a story that makes us pause and wonder, what truly shapes humankind? And could history repeat itself? As the door of the introduction gently closes, we find ourselves at a crucial crossroads in the story. From revealing a secret buried for 8,000 years, our journey now begins to delve into the very core of the matter. The moment where history, society, and biology intersect to create an unprecedented test of evolution. And to understand why 90% of men were removed from the timeline, we must return to the starting point of it all, the most brutal selection event in human history. This was not a dramatic event that you could imagine through the crashing sounds of war or the screams of disaster. It did not bear the face of instant destruction. On the contrary, it was quiet, slow, enduring over millennia. Like an underground current, unheard by anyone yet strong enough to erode entire civilizations. What makes this event terrifying is not its speed, but its subtlety. It did not kill men with swords or fire, but through the rules of society, through the workings of culture, through choices that seemed harmless at the time. At the dawn of the Neolithic era, when humans were stepping beyond hunting and gathering into the age of agriculture, the world seemed to have been rewritten. Land became the new measure of value, crops became the source of life, and humans had, for the first time, to consider accumulation, ownership, and protection, concepts that had been almost non-existent in nomadic life. But it was precisely in the moment humanity gained the ability to create surplus that they inadvertently built a new social structure, one that was stable, competitive, and unforgiving. Within this context, men became the center of the race for power and resources. They were no longer isolated individuals but drawn into the whirlpool of clans, lineages, and generations. A man did not merely represent himself, he represented a group whose survival depended entirely on whether they won or lost in this race for existence. Then something strange happened. Powerful clans conquered land, expanded influence, and consolidated power. Weaker groups were pushed back, fragmented, or vanished entirely. But what is even more astonishing is this. The strong groups did not merely win through strength, they won genetically. Meanwhile, the weak groups lost not only land and power but also the ability to pass on their genes. And when they disappeared from the social structure, all their male descendants vanished from human history forever. This is the true nature of the most brutal selection in history. It did not focus on what could be seen with the naked eye but on what would be observed under the genetic microscope thousands of years later, the mass disappearance of male Y chromosome lineages, a purge that many scientists, upon first seeing the data, assumed must be a system error. Yet when data from multiple regions of the world aligned, when dozens of independent models showed similar results, science had no choice but to accept the reality. A storm of evolution had once occurred, its victims were men, and that storm was caused by humanity itself. The horror lies not only in the figure, 90%, already staggering in its own right, but in the way those 90% were erased. They did not die all at once, they did not fall on battlefields. Instead, they were not chosen, not sustained, not allowed to leave a trace in humanity's family tree. They existed, they lived, they loved, they worked. Yet in the end, they were forgotten in the very genetic legacy of humankind. Imagine standing in a Neolithic village. Each family group is a branch of lineage. Some branches thrive, producing many sons, expanding land, consolidating power. Other branches slowly wither, fewer children, scarce resources, unable to protect their land. Within 2, 3, 4 generations, a branch could disappear entirely simply because no male heir survived. And when that happens, the entire Y chromosome line vanishes as well. Now imagine this process multiplied, not for 10 or 50 generations, but for 3,000 continuous years. It turns out that no global war or devastating plague was needed to remove 90% of men from history. All it took was a social system, where clan-based competition was the norm, operating exactly as it was designed to. This brings us to a crucial point: the true power of this event lies not in death, but in selection. Selection by status. Selection by resources. Selection by survivability. And most importantly, selection by choice. In Neolithic society, as women began to move into their husbands' clans, as marriage became less about individual bonds and more about alliances between groups, their choices became decisive in determining which men had the chance for their genes to persist. A man from a strong, resource-rich, stable, and secure clan, though not biologically exceptional, was more likely to be chosen as a partner. Conversely, a man from a weak clan, though healthy, kind, or intelligent, might be excluded from the genetic lineage simply because he could not ensure a future for his children. This is the deepest layer of the selection event. Men were not eliminated by a single factor, but by a combination of social and sexual choices, working together in ways that even the people of that time could not fully perceive. This is what makes the event unique. Indeed, frightening. It shows that humans evolve not only through natural forces but also through the cultural systems they create. And sometimes, these systems operate so powerfully that they erase almost half a population without any catastrophe at all. Looking back at that time, we do not see merely a genetic event, but an entire historical period in which society, silently, patiently, sometimes inadvertently, determined human fate. This forms the foundation for the story we are about to explore, a journey uncovering the forgotten truth of how the ancient world shaped the modern world, how small individual choices became forces of massive evolutionary change. And this is where the introduction ends, giving way to part 1, the sweeping picture of the most brutal selection in history. Where the disappearance of 90% of men is no longer just a statistic, but a story about systems, about humanity, and about how history is written through invisible laws. As the curtain of part 1 gently falls, leaving behind the shocking truth of the brutal selection that reshaped humanity, our journey steps into a different realm, where modern science dialogues with the past. If the previous section revealed the scale and social nature of this evolutionary tragedy, now, in part 2, we delve deeper, into the very structure of genetics, to trace the remaining marks. For though the people of 8,000 years ago have dissolved into the dust of time, their DNA remains, preserving everything they once experienced. And it is DNA that opens the door to the strangest story in human history, the mass disappearance of male lineages. If Neolithic society was the massive machine that executed this selection, then DNA is the sole living witness capable of recounting it all. Every hypothesis about war, disease, or natural disaster remained mere speculation until scientists examined the Y chromosome and discovered something no one had expected, a genetic extinction pattern stretching globally, so consistent it could not be random. Let us begin with the startling discovery by the research team led by Monica Carmen. A group not searching for answers in conjecture or folklore, but in the tiny molecules deep within every human cell. When they reconstructed the genetic map of humanity over the past 10,000 years, they noticed a strange phenomenon: most Y chromosome lineages abruptly stopped, as if cut off by an invisible hand. There was no gradual development, no smooth evolutionary change. Instead, male lineages collapsed almost simultaneously, spanning from the Middle East, Europe, South Asia, to East Asia. These lineages, some of which had existed for tens of thousands of years, suddenly went extinct. No male descendants remained. No trace survived in our bodies. They vanished as if they had never existed. Even more astonishingly, while the Y chromosome, the male lineage marker, plunged into extinction, female mitochondrial DNA remained stable, even exhibiting normal diversity. This forced science to ask: if a natural disaster or pandemic had occurred, why were only men erased from history, while women appeared unaffected? The data showed no signs of a female population imbalance. No sharp decline in women occurred in any surveyed region. The loss was entirely male. This was not a biological collapse, it was a social collapse. Further investigation revealed an astonishing detail: most of what remains today are star-like clusters of lineages, genetic structures shaped like stars. This means a very small number of men during that period had an extraordinary number of sons, and their sons went on to have countless sons, forming abnormally large clusters of genes. These men did not merely reproduce successfully, they nearly monopolized reproduction. Conversely, countless other men, who may have lived, thrived, and existed in society, had no chance to pass on their genes. And when they died, their genetic line vanished. No sound. No trace. No memory. Imagine. Before the bottleneck, the genetic map would show countless small lineages, many intertwined families scattered everywhere. After the bottleneck, the map contained only a few major lineages, superlineages, dominating the male population worldwide. Remarkably, most of us, especially men, still carry the legacy of these surviving men. Today, the Y chromosome is far poorer than in the past because of this event. The male gene pool was once rich, diverse, and complex. But after the bottleneck, it narrowed to a suffocating extent. Modern Y chromosome structure is shaped not by thousands of lineages, but by a few dominant individuals. This leads to an unavoidable question: who were these men? What allowed them to survive the greatest social natural selection of all time? And more importantly, why were nearly all other men eliminated? Genetic models indicate this cannot be explained by chance. A 90% extinction rate is far too high to be random. It must have been driven by a powerful, continuous selection mechanism, operating over millennia. Here, science reconnects with the previous section: Neolithic society, with its clan structure and concentration of power among a few lineages, enabled certain men to have disproportionately many offspring. If their clan was strong, owning land, resources, power, influence, they would have many wives, partners, and social alliances. Each alliance translated directly into the next reproductive opportunity. The bottleneck did not occur when men died, it occurred when men were not chosen. Women, whether unintentionally or deliberately, through mate selection, became the deciding factor in which genes continued and which ended. Not out of cruelty, but out of survival. A resource-based society required women to choose men capable of securing a future for their children. In the harsh world of early agriculture, this meant choosing men from strong, wealthy, stable clans, regardless of the individual's personal qualities. Generation by generation, group by group, territory by territory, the pattern repeated. One group of men produced numerous descendants, while another had few or no sons to maintain the lineage. Each generation was an erasure. Each century, a purge. Each millennium, a genetic storm sweeping away nearly all male history. And when Monica Carmen's team examined the data, they saw not only disappearance, they saw a story. A story of power. A story of competition. A story of choice. A story of how society rewrote the biological structure of humankind itself. What makes this part particularly important is that it proves the bottleneck was not a socially fabricated hypothesis, it is a truth engraved in every segment of our DNA. When you look at the Y chromosome of any modern man, you are seeing the trace of the last survivors of that evolutionary storm. From DNA, we also understand that this event was not momentary but continuous. Hundreds of lineages disappeared not simultaneously, but in waves, layers, and social pulses. Some once strong clans faded as times changed. Some small clans unexpectedly rose to prominence across entire continents due to favorable moments. Genetic data show these disappearances align with economic and social transitions, from hunting to farming, from nomadism to settlement. This truth makes Part 2 not merely a scientific analysis, but a mirror reflecting our own history. Within each cell, each segment of DNA, humanity carries the memory of those chosen and those erased. And this is the bridge to Part 3, if DNA proves an undeniable truth, what caused the disappearance of all those lineages? Was it war, mass extinction, or something else lurking in the shadows? This is where we move into Part 3, where the truth continues to unfold, layer by layer. As the light from the DNA molecules quietly begins to reveal the story of the vanished lineages, we start to see the true shape of a strange phenomenon, an evolutionary purge in which nearly all men were erased from history, yet women remained intact. From these genetic traces, we not only see loss, but also a profound, unanswered question: what really caused 90% of men to disappear? Could the cause be the disasters, bloody wars, or devastating epidemics that humans have imagined? This question marks the transition into the next chapter, eliminating the hypotheses of war and mass extinction, where we will explore why all these seemingly reasonable explanations fail to account for this mysterious phenomenon. From thousands of archaeological sites across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, researchers have found abundant evidence of Neolithic violence, mass graves, injured bones, traces of confrontations, and signs of violent disputes within communities. On the surface, these data might appear sufficient to explain part of the male population decline. A bloody battle, an outbreak of disease, or a severe natural disaster could have killed many men. Yet when scientists looked deeper, they discovered something surprising: these wars or natural catastrophes did not produce such a severe gender imbalance. If war or disease were the primary cause, women's numbers would have been similarly affected. After all, men and women lived in the same communities and were equally exposed to disasters, disease, and conflict. But genetic data show that women's mitochondrial DNA remained stable, while most men's Y chromosomes vanished. This is a paradox, a clear sign that natural disaster or violence alone cannot explain the phenomenon. Imagine a brutal battle in a Neolithic village. Dozens or even hundreds of men might die, but women survive, flee, or are absorbed into other communities. If only war were at play, the male population decline could be temporary, but it could not leave a genetic imprint lasting millennia, erasing 90% of Y chromosome lineages. This demonstrates that the cause was not merely physical death, but a complex social and biological mechanism, where men were prevented from passing on their genes even if they lived. The same applies to the mass extinction hypothesis. A pandemic or severe ecological event might drastically reduce population numbers, but it would affect both men and women, and lineages would not be selectively eliminated as the genetic data show. Moreover, surveys across multiple regions reveal that the disappearance of Y chromosome lineages was not a local event, but occurred synchronously across a vast range, from Europe to Asia, forming a global pattern that localized disasters or epidemics cannot explain. This leads to an important conclusion: natural factors were not the primary cause. The answer lies in the intrinsic mechanisms of Neolithic society. As humans began to settle, develop agriculture, and form clans, power and resources concentrated in the hands of certain individuals and groups. Men from strong clans became the pillars of society, controlling land, resources, and survival. Conversely, men from weaker or less influential clans, no matter how healthy or skilled, were not chosen to pass on their genes. Here, the concept of reproductive skew, the unequal distribution of reproductive success, emerges as an explanation for this unusual event. Only a small number of men claimed the majority of reproductive opportunities, while the vast majority were excluded from the genetic lineage. This is a socially naturalized mechanism, where power, status, and mate choice determine who survives and who is forgotten in biological history. We can imagine the scene: weaker men, lacking power or resources, living among stronger men, but their children never come into being, or only a few survive. Generation after generation, this pattern repeats, and within a few centuries, the weaker Y chromosome lineages disappear entirely. They did not die from disease or war, they were not chosen to continue through offspring. And this created a silent evolutionary storm, sweeping away nearly all men outside the socially elite groups. By ruling out war and mass extinction, we not only identify the true cause, but also clearly see how social and sexual selection combine to shape humanity. DNA, archaeology, and anthropology together tell a single story. The male bottleneck 8,000 years ago was not a natural disaster, but the result of complex social mechanisms and intentional evolutionary selection. It is worth noting that archaeological records still show signs of violence, mass graves, and skeletal trauma in Neolithic humans. But this evidence is only the tip of the iceberg. Violence and warfare could cause local fatalities, but cannot explain the near-complete eradication of Y chromosome lineages, nor create a uniform global pattern. So what made the difference? It was the social mechanism, where male power, clan stratification, and women's mate choices combined to determine who was allowed to pass on genes and who was not. In the Neolithic context, when women moved to their husbands' clans and children's survival depended on the father's ability to secure resources, this choice became a potent evolutionary weapon, determining the fate of millions of men. Thus, Part 3 of this story opens a vivid and profound picture of human history. The disappearance of 90% of men was not due to external forces, but was the inevitable result of social structures and survival strategies of early humans. DNA is merely the proof, archaeology is the clue. Together, they paint the portrait of a silent evolutionary STO. RM, where human choice was the most powerful force. And as we rule out war and mass extinction, we prepare to move into the next chapter, where the agricultural revolution emerges as a key variable, permanently transforming social structures and the foundation of survival, leading to genetic consequences still visible in our Y chromosomes today. It is at this point that humanity, by its own methods, initiated a silent yet potent selection. A purge requiring no swords, no fire, only the new rules of society and power. As we have just ruled out the hypotheses of war and natural disasters, realizing that the true power of the event 8,000 years ago did not lie in spears or waves of disease, but in social mechanisms and reproductive choice, a new question arises. What created the context in which this mechanism could operate with such devastating strength? This is when we must turn our attention to the agricultural revolution, a quiet yet comprehensive upheaval, where human life, social structures, and the course of inheritance began to be rewritten profoundly, step by step, silently yet relentlessly. Before the agricultural revolution, humans lived in hunter-gatherer societies. Nomadic life, decentralized and without the concept of long-term ownership, meant that individuals were nearly equal in their right to survive. We moved with the group, shared food, and depended on the community to persist. In this context, personal and clan power had not yet formed, reproductive opportunities were relatively evenly distributed, and male lineages faced little pressure from fierce competition. However, when humans began to cultivate crops, domesticate animals, and settle permanently, everything changed, quietly but permanently. Rice, wheat, cereals, and livestock became valuable resources, creating surpluses that no one could ignore. Fields were cultivated, granaries stocked, livestock cared for, each item became property, and simultaneously a measure of power. The concept of assets and ownership suddenly became tied to survival and the security of the next generation. This surplus did more than change daily life, it established social stratification. No longer temporary small groups, everything became fixed. Some clans owned abundant land and food, controlling resources, weaker clans were pushed aside or forced to migrate. Inequality, which had been temporary in nomadic societies, now accumulated, became durable, and was inherited across generations. In this new context, men were no longer independent individuals but pillars of the clan, guardians of power, land, and property. Women, through the mechanism of moving to their husband's clan, became crucial links, deciding who would pass on their genes and who would be excluded from reproduction. The agricultural revolution, therefore, was not just an economic revolution, it was a biological revolution, where principles of choice and social power shaped evolution itself. Imagine a settled Neolithic society, strong men, wealthy in resources, controlling land and food, became the center of marital alliances. A weaker man, no matter how healthy or talented, would struggle to pass on his genes if he lacked property or social standing. Women's mate choices became an evolutionary weapon, where a man's fate was determined not by strength or luck, but by his ability to claim and maintain economic and social power. The agricultural revolution also brought comprehensive changes in culture and social values. Previously, hunter-gatherer communities judged individuals by survival skills, physical strength, or experience. But with land, surpluses, and property, mate selection criteria shifted. Who owned resources, who controlled the harvest, who could keep children safe suddenly determined genetic fate. This is the mechanism behind the mass disappearance of male Y chromosome lineages that we have observed. This transformation did not happen overnight. It unfolded over hundreds, even thousands, of years, and every silent step of the agricultural revolution added competitive pressure on men. Strong clans expanded influence, seized land and resources, weaker clans were pushed back, losing reproductive opportunities. Generation by generation, village by village, a pattern was reinforced, where male fate was determined not by strength or chance, but by position within the new social system. Biologically, the agricultural revolution created a silent but powerful selection storm, requiring no warfare or disease, yet sufficient to erase 90% of men from the historical record. It is proof that economic and social change can directly influence evolution, reshaping genetic structures once thought to be influenced solely by nature. Beyond genetics, the agricultural revolution redefined power structures and cultural systems. Systems of inheritance, patrilineal clans, male authority, and layered marriage patterns seen in modern societies all trace their roots to this period. Even strategies of mate selection and prioritization of social status continue to shape how humans seek partners, form families, and maintain genetic lines today. Thus, the agricultural revolution was a quiet yet all-encompassing event. It appeared with no thunder, no accompanying wars or plagues, yet its power was sufficient to rewrite the entire history of men. It laid the foundation for the social biological selection mechanism we call reproductive skew, where a few men claim most reproductive opportunities, while the majority have none. Imagine the scene: vast fields, men and women moving, choosing, forming alliances, marrying, bearing children. And every decision, every union, every possession generating evolutionary consequences lasting millennia. Strong clans expanded their Y chromosome lineages, while weaker clans gradually vanished, taking entire male genetic lines with them. In the larger picture, the agricultural revolution was the machine that reshaped the biological and social history of humanity. It created an environment where power, resources, and personal choice intertwined to produce a brutal, silent, yet more effective selection than any natural disaster. From this perspective, it becomes clear, the disappearance of 90% of men was not random, but an inevitable outcome of this comprehensive transformation. And with this understanding, we are ready to move to the next chapter, where patrilineal clans and male authority rise, and every Y chromosome lineage, every family, every individual is drawn into the vortex of power, resources, and reproductive choice, producing consequences that history and genetics will remember forever. As the light of the agricultural revolution gradually dawns, we begin to see the full picture of the quiet yet comprehensive transformation brought about by Neolithic civilization. Power, resources, food surpluses, and land-created social stratification, established new rules for mate selection and inheritance. Yet this picture is still incomplete. From the agricultural revolution, an important and profound consequence began to emerge: the rise of patrilineal clans and male power. This is when power, lineage, and reproductive mechanisms converged, creating a social model in which men became pillars not only of their families but of entire generations, even entire civilizations. In Neolithic society, when property could be passed down, power was no longer temporary, it accumulated and was reinforced across generations. Clans possessing vast lands, abundant food stores, and control over critical resources became virtually invincible in protecting their interests. From here, men in these clans became pillars of authority, seen as guarantors of the survival of both family and community. Every action and decision they made, from expanding territory, managing crops, to maintaining alliances with other clans, directly affected the survival and reproductive success of the next generation. This also meant that women, in the context of moving to their husband's clan, became the decisive factor in determining who would pass on their genes and who would not. When a strong clan controlled land and wealth, its men became the preferred choice for marriage, reproduction, and the expansion of lineage. Conversely, men from weaker clans, no matter their health or personal skills, were excluded from the genetic survival loop. This mechanism led to a phenomenon called reproductive skew, where a few men reproduced extremely successfully, while the vast majority had little or no opportunity to pass on their genes. Imagine a society where power and resources were concentrated in the hands of a few clans. Strong, intelligent, wealthy men not only controlled crops, land, and granaries but also dominated reproductive opportunities. They had multiple wives and many children, and their offspring inherited property, power, and reproductive advantage. Meanwhile, weaker men, regardless of ability, were left behind, unable to produce heirs, and gradually, their Y chromosome lines disappeared. The rise of patrilineal clans was not only a story of male power but also the consolidation of a socio-biological reproductive mechanism. When a strong clan expanded its power, it not only protected resources but also controlled the reproductive opportunities of other men. Every marriage alliance, every courtship, every decision to marry became part of a long-term survival strategy. In this context, personal choice was guided by clan principles, and male power became the determining factor in genetic survival. Genetic data from today's Y chromosomes still preserve traces of this phenomenon. Dominant haplogroups such as R1b, O, C, or E did not appear and spread randomly across continents. They are evidence of the dominance of a few strong male clans that survived the bottleneck 8,000 years ago and expanded their lineages. Weaker lineages, which did not control resources or power, were eliminated, almost disappearing from the genetic map. The rise of patrilineal clans also meant that male power became sustainable and inheritable, creating social patterns still visible in modern societies: inheritance systems, inequality, prioritization of status and property, and layered marriage structures. Even in contemporary society, those who possess resources, power, and status tend to have greater opportunities for marriage and reproduction, reflecting a pattern established millennia ago. Crucially, this mechanism was not based on individual strength or mere luck, but on the coordination of power, resources, and reproductive choice. A man could be healthy, talented, and intelligent, but if he did not belong to a strong clan, did not control resources, and was not chosen by women, he would have no sons to continue his lineage. Conversely, a weaker man from a powerful clan could have many descendants, creating an extreme reproductive disparity. In this context, the rise of patrilineal clans also reshaped the entire social and cultural structure. Marriage alliances were no longer merely matters of affection or personal preference but became strategic tools, where power and inheritance were protected, and weaker men were excluded from genetic survival. The combination of male power and female choice created a survival loop, where only men from strong clans had a chance to pass on their genes. Imagine this influence extending over millennia. Generation after generation, clan after clan, marital alliance after alliance, consolidating and expanding male power. The Y chromosome lines of weaker clans were eliminated, while the strong branches became dominant, spreading and prevailing globally. This process explains why today, most men worldwide belong to only a few haplogroups, and why Y chromosome diversity is far lower than that of female mitochondrial DNA. The rise of patrilineal clans is not merely a story of power. It is a story of socially shaped evolutionary selection. It demonstrates that humanity evolves not only through natural forces but also through social mechanisms of our own making, where power, property, and mate choice combine to decide who survives and who disappears from history. This also helps us understand the mechanism of hypergamy, where women select mates based on the ability to secure safety, resources, and power for their offspring. In the context of rising patrilineal clans, hypergamy was no longer a social norm or prejudice but became an evolutionary strategy, where personal choice was tightly linked to survival and the expansion of lineage. Looking at the whole picture, we see that this fifth part not only explains the rise of clans and male power but also reveals the tight connection between society, culture, and biological evolution. It marks a critical point where power and personal choice became forces shaping genetic history, where strong lineages survived, and weak ones were erased. From here, we are ready to move to the next part, where mate choice becomes a true survival weapon, where women's decisions in selecting partners determine who will persist, who will vanish, and generate the genetic consequences we still feel today. Strong clans, male authority, and hypergamy converge to shape an evolutionary turning point that human history will never forget. As the picture of patrilineal clans and male power comes into focus, we begin to realize that power was not merely about owning land, controlling resources, or maintaining social order, it was also the key determinant of genetic survival. The Y chromosome lineages that persist today reflect not only material strength or social status but also the traces of a far more subtle and profound mechanism, mate choice, a truly selective weapon, silent yet immensely powerful. This is where male power, women's choice, and social survival strategies converge, creating a ruthless but subtle selection process almost invisible to the naked eye. In the Neolithic context, where patrilineal clans rose and wealth accumulated across generations, life was no longer just about basic survival but a series of strategic decisions. A wealthy man who controlled land and harvests not only secured his own survival but also ensured the survival of his offspring. Conversely, a weaker man, even if healthy or talented, but lacking power and resources, had almost no chance of reproducing. In that world, every marriage decision, every marital alliance, became a selective weapon, with women indirectly yet powerfully deciding who would survive genetically. Remarkably, this mechanism did not rely on violence or warfare but on deliberate, strategic female choice. When women selected mates based on the ability to provide resources, protect children, and maintain status, they were executing an extremely potent evolutionary act. This explains why most men were excluded from the reproductive pool, while a small number of strong, wealthy, and powerful men transmitted their genes at overwhelmingly higher rates, creating dominant superlineages of Y chromosomes across continents. Imagine the scene, a Neolithic village where the strongest clans controlled crops, granaries, and territory. Women in this community did not choose husbands solely based on personal affection but according to survival criteria. Choosing a poor, weak man meant risk for their children, starvation or inability to protect the family. Choosing a wealthy, powerful man increased the next generation's chances of survival. This was no longer a matter of romance but absolute survival strategy, where every decision had long-lasting genetic consequences. Researchers call this phenomenon reproductive skew, describing the reality that some men fathered dozens or even hundreds of children, while the vast majority had no opportunity to pass on their genes. Reproductive skew was not random but the result of the coordination between male power, property, and female choice. In this context, mate choice became a weapon more powerful than any war or natural disaster. It determined who survived, whose lineage continued, and who was erased from biological history. Crucially, this mechanism operated silently but persistently, repeated over generations. Every marriage, alliance, and reproductive decision reinforced the power of strong clans and eliminated weaker ones. Over time, this led to a significant reduction in Y chromosome diversity, while female mitochondrial DNA remained stable, reflecting a one-way selective process affecting only male lineages. Hypergamy, or the marrying up strategy, emerged as a key factor in this mechanism. In the Neolithic context, hypergamy was not a social prejudice or moral notion but an optimal evolutionary strategy. A woman choosing a wealthy, powerful husband not only protected herself but also her children, ensuring the next generation had the highest chance of survival. Hypergamy, in effect, was a potent survival tool, contributing to reproductive skew and shaping the male genetic structure. This explains why, when looking at the modern genetic map, certain male haplogroups dominate overwhelmingly while most other lineages vanished entirely. The men who survived the 8,000-year-old bottleneck were those from strong, wealthy, powerful clans, selected by women and able to pass on their genes. Weaker Y chromosome lineages, though present materially, were not chosen and gradually disappeared from the historical record. The consequences of this mechanism extend beyond genetics. They are deeply embedded in social and cultural structures. Male power was reinforced, strong clans continued expanding their influence, and stratified marriage models emerged. These selection principles persisted for millennia, creating a mechanism still perceptible today, individuals with resources and power generally have greater opportunities for marriage and reproduction, reflecting a Neolithic legacy. Importantly, this mechanism demonstrates that human survival was not dictated solely by nature, but also by social decisions, individual choices, and power dynamics. In the Neolithic context, women held genetic authority, and mate choice became the most powerful survival weapon. Thanks to this selection, the bottleneck 8,000 years ago was not the result of natural disasters or warfare but of a sophisticated socio-evolutionary mechanism, where each individual decision profoundly impacted the human lineage. Imagine the long-term consequences. Each generation, each clan, each lineage was shaped by this reproductive choice. Strong lineages were reinforced and expanded, weak ones were eliminated entirely. Over time, this produced an astonishing genetic disparity, with a few men dominating global reproduction while most others disappeared from the genetic map. Thus, this sixth part reveals an obvious yet overlooked truth. Mate choice is the true selective weapon, more powerful than any tool of war or natural disaster. It demonstrates that evolution did not occur solely on the biological map but also through social decisions, power, resources, and in the hearts of Neolithic women, who, intentionally or unintentionally, rewrote the history of men and the human Y chromosome. From here, we are ready to move to the next section, where we will delve into hypergamy strategies, analyzing how they functioned as an evolutionary principle and seeing clearly why some men became superlineages, while most were erased from history, leaving an enduring imprint on the global genetic map. As we explore the power of mate choice as a survival weapon, an even more sophisticated mechanism emerges, explaining the complete elimination pattern of male Y chromosome lineages, hypergamy. An evolutionary strategy in which women select mates based on their ability to provide resources, power, and survival opportunities for their offspring. Hypergamy is not a social bias or moral notion, but a profound, subtle biological strategy with long-lasting effects on human evolution. It is the crucial missing piece linking male power, individual choice, and the disappearance of 90% of men in human history 8,000 years ago. In the Neolithic context, where property, land, and food surpluses became the center of power, hypergamy emerged as an inevitable survival principle. Through their selection, women determined who could pass on genes and who could not. A wealthy man controlling land and harvests became the preferred choice for marriage, ensuring that offspring would have a safe environment and sufficient resources. Conversely, a weaker man, no matter how healthy or intelligent, but without power or wealth, had almost no reproductive opportunity. In that world, hypergamy was not about romance, it was a survival-driven evolutionary strategy, where each choice determined the existence or extinction of a lineage. Researchers call this phenomenon reproductive skew, the extreme reproductive disparity in which a few men monopolize most reproductive opportunities, while the vast majority have almost no offspring. Reproductive skew was not random, it resulted from the interplay of male power, clan wealth, and hypergamy strategy. Every marriage, every clan alliance, became a step in a silent storm of selection, where the fate of millions of men was determined not by strength or luck but by their capacity to seize power and be chosen by women. Picture the scene, a Neolithic village where powerful clans controlled harvests, granaries, and territory. Women in the community, through mate choice, enacted an extraordinarily potent evolutionary action. Selecting wealthy, powerful, and stable men to bear children, thereby eliminating weaker men from the reproductive pool. Each decision, seemingly personal, was in fact a survival tool with profound consequences lasting millennia. Hypergamy also explains why the male bottleneck occurred simultaneously across vast regions, from Europe to Asia, and why female mitochondrial DNA remained stable. This mechanism affected only male Y chromosomes, selecting strong, powerful lineages while eliminating weaker ones. Strong lineages became superlineages, spreading across continents, while the majority of men, lacking opportunity, gradually disappeared from the genetic record. Notably, hypergamy is not a matter of ethics or prejudice, but a principle of survival and evolution. It demonstrates that evolution did not occur solely through natural forces, disease, or warfare, but also through social decisions, individual choices, and power dynamics. By selecting strong, wealthy men, women, intentionally or not, became authors of genetic history, creating the dominant Y chromosome lineages we observe today. The combination of hypergamy and patrilineal clans amplified this mechanism. When a powerful clan controlled resources, men within that clan were not only chosen by women in the community but also able to maintain and expand their lineage. Conversely, weaker men, even if physically capable, were excluded from reproduction. Over generations, strong Y chromosome lineages were reinforced, weak ones eliminated, resulting in the genetic dominance seen today. Hypergamy also explains why some men became global superlineages, spreading across continents and dominating genetic inheritance. Haplogroups such as R1b, O, C, and E, the dominant male haplogroups today, are evidence of this mechanism. Strong, wealthy, powerful men were chosen by women to pass on their genes, creating extreme reproductive disparities that even natural disasters or wars could not account for. The consequences of hypergamy extend beyond genetics. They shaped social and cultural structures. Male power was reinforced, strong clans continued to expand influence, and stratified marriage models emerged. Even in modern societies, individuals with resources, power, and status still enjoy greater opportunities for marriage and reproduction, reflecting a Neolithic legacy formed through hypergamy. Another key point is that hypergamy functions as a sophisticated evolutionary selection tool, where individual decisions have strategic social significance, directly influencing evolution. Through mate choice, women controlled genetic flow, determining who would survive and who would disappear from history. This demonstrates that human evolution was influenced not only by nature, but also by social decisions and power structures, where mate choice became the most crucial factor. Imagine the effect stretching over millennia. Each generation, each clan, each lineage was shaped by hypergamy. Strong lineages were reinforced and expanded, weak ones eliminated. Over time, this produced a staggering genetic disparity, with a few men dominating reproduction globally, while most others vanished from the genetic map. Hypergamy also explains why women have always been seen as silent evolutionary agents. Their power lies not only in social choice but in the ability to manipulate genetic flow, creating a selective pressure stronger than any natural disaster or war. This silent strength, exercised across generations, was the main cause of the male bottleneck 8,000 years ago and explains why today Y chromosome diversity is so poor compared to female mitochondrial DNA. Thus, this seventh part concludes an obvious yet often overlooked truth. Hypergamy is an evolutionary strategy, not a social bias, where every individual decision by women becomes a potent selective force, shaping male lineages and producing consequences that span millennia. This final mechanism allows us to fully understand why 90% of men disappeared from human history and leads us to the next step. The genetic consequences of this event, where we will see why today's Y chromosome diversity is so limited, reflecting the power and efficiency of hypergamy in human evolution. Having understood the power of hypergamy as an evolutionary strategy, where women select mates based on power, resources, and the ability to ensure offspring survival, an important question arises. What legacy have all these selection mechanisms, power dynamics, and reproductive strategies left on the human genetic map? This is the moment to look deeper into the genetic consequences, where the male Y chromosome today carries the imprint of extreme selection, becoming impoverished and dominated by a few strong lineages, while most other lineages have vanished permanently. The bottleneck 8,000 years ago was not merely an abstract historical event, it was a silent revolution in evolution, where social and reproductive choices combined to shape the genetic future. When women favored marriage with wealthy, powerful men capable of protecting their children, reproductive skew emerged, a phenomenon in which a small number of men captured the majority of reproductive opportunities while most others had none. The result was a drastic narrowing of the Y chromosome, leading to the reduced male genetic diversity we observe today. Looking at the modern genetic map, the dominance of certain haplogroups such as R1b, O, C, and E across Europe, Asia, and Africa is striking. These lineages did not become prevalent by chance, they are direct products of the socio-biological choices women made over millennia. Each strong haplogroup represents wealthy, powerful clans repeatedly chosen for reproduction. Meanwhile, hundreds or thousands of weaker lineages disappeared entirely, leaving a male genetic landscape that is low in diversity, yet highly concentrated and dominant. A crucial point is that this extreme reproductive disparity did not affect female mitochondrial DNA. Genetic stability among women reflects that, regardless of mate choice, female genes were transmitted relatively evenly across generations. In contrast, the male Y chromosome became a map of power, resources, and hypergamy. Strong lineages expanded, weak lineages vanished, reflecting a relentless and systematic selection process. This means that each modern Y chromosome lineage is a living historical record, capturing the social survival strategies of the Neolithic era. Men today carrying dominant haplogroups are descendants of individuals who once held power, controlled resources, and were selected by women for reproduction. Unfortunate lineages, those outside powerful clans or not chosen, were erased, leaving a genetic void that nature and evolution cannot fully restore. These genetic consequences are not merely biological events, they have profound implications for modern culture and society. When power and resources remain key determinants of reproductive opportunities, patterns of hypergamy and reproductive skew persist. Powerful clans, or individuals with wealth and social status, continue to enjoy greater opportunities for marriage and reproduction, reflecting a selective mechanism evident 8,000 years ago. Today's impoverished Y chromosome is evidence that social choices do not create only temporary disparities, they shape the global genetic structure for millennia. Imagine the evolutionary impact. As weak male lineages disappeared, genes were transmitted only through a few strong lineages, reducing male genetic diversity. This scarcity may limit the adaptive capacity of men to future biological or environmental challenges, as less diversity means fewer raw materials for evolution. In contrast, female mitochondrial DNA remains rich and stable, showing a one-sided selection mechanism affecting only males. The impoverished Y chromosome also explains why some men today appear with extremely high genetic prevalence globally, becoming superlineages capable of spreading and dominating. These lineages testify to the power of hypergamy combined with male power, a social mechanism transformed into an evolutionary force, where women's choices profoundly influenced global genetic inheritance. This also reveals the remarkable yet dangerous power of social evolution. When power, resources, and mate choice converge, they create a ruthless selection mechanism, eliminating millions of males while allowing only a few to maintain power and lineage. Today's genetic map stands as evidence of this intense selection, reminding us that evolution is not solely a product of nature but also a consequence of social behavior and strategic survival decisions. Moreover, the impoverished Y chromosome raises important questions about future evolutionary potential. With severely reduced male genetic diversity, the ability to adapt to environmental changes, diseases, or biological challenges may be limited. This offers a crucial lesson. contemporary social mechanisms that continue to create similar reproductive disparities could lead to a modern bottleneck, where social choice once again determines the genetic fate of millions. The genetic consequences of the bottleneck 8,000 years ago are not just a historical event. They are a living record, capturing the intersection of hypergamy, male power, and social selection. They demonstrate that evolution and civilization are intertwined. Social mechanisms, from patrilineal clans to marriage strategies, directly cause the mass disappearance of Y chromosome lineages. Thus, when we examine today's Y chromosomes, we see not only genes but also history, power, survival strategies, and human decisions spanning millennia. From here, we are ready to move into the next part, where the cultural legacy of these events will be explored, helping us understand how power, choice, and Neolithic evolution still influence social structures, marriage patterns, and male authority today. The impoverished Y chromosome is not just a story of genetics, it is a testament to the social systems humans created, leaving an indelible mark on human history. Having fully grasped the profound genetic consequences left by the bottleneck 8,000 years ago, particularly the extreme impoverishment and concentration of the male Y chromosome, we begin to see the broader picture, not only biologically but also in terms of a cultural legacy spanning millennia. Social mechanisms, reproductive choices, and male power dynamics from the Neolithic era have left deep imprints on cultural and social structures, as well as modern power patterns. The impoverished Y chromosome serves as a biological record, but the cultural legacy it reflects is even more powerful, directly influencing how humans organize power, marriage, inheritance, and social relationships to this day. The rise of patrilineal clans, male authority, and hypergamy not only led to reproductive skew but also shaped social structures, where power, wealth, and status determined reproductive opportunities and the survival of lineages. Even in modern civilizations, traces of this mechanism remain. Powerful clans or individuals possessing wealth and social status generally enjoy greater opportunities for marriage, alliance, and reproduction. This demonstrates that the cultural legacy from the Neolithic era is not just a historical phenomenon, it continues to shape how societies function and influence contemporary power dynamics. A key aspect of this legacy is inheritance structures. When power and wealth concentrated in a few strong clans, inheritance rules were established to protect and extend that power across generations. Sons of powerful families inherited land, assets, and status, while weaker lineages were excluded from social and genetic survival. This provides clear evidence that cultural and genetic legacies are inseparable, working together to maintain and reinforce male power and to expand the influence of dominant clans over time. Beyond power and inheritance, this cultural legacy also impacts marriage patterns and gender relations. From the Neolithic era, mate choice became a strategic tool, with women playing a key role in determining who would transmit genes and who would not. In many cultures, cross-class marriage patterns emerged, prioritizing unions with individuals of wealth, power, and high status. These patterns persisted for millennia and still influence modern societies, where resources, status, and the ability to provide remain critical criteria in mate selection. A clear example of this cultural legacy is the scope and reach of male power in modern society. Although contemporary societies are more egalitarian, natural and social mechanisms still maintain certain Neolithic principles. Those with resources, power, and status generally have greater reproductive opportunities and influence over communities. The dominant Y chromosome lineages we see today directly reflect systematic reproductive choices reinforced by cultural and social power, continuing to shape male power structures in the present. This cultural legacy is also evident in family and social organization patterns. Strong clans not only controlled property but also regulated reproductive opportunities within the community. Marital alliances became tools to protect power, where the combination of male authority and female choice created a social survival cycle. These models have been preserved over time, forming social rules and norms, from inheritance to marital conventions, many of which remain in modern society. Moreover, the Neolithic bottleneck's cultural legacy affected social values, attitudes, and perceptions of power, resources, and gender. Prioritizing powerful and wealthy men in reproductive selection created long-lasting social concepts about male roles, authority, protection, and resource provision. Although these perceptions have evolved, they still leave traces in modern norms, influencing how societies view male power, mate selection, marriage, and inheritance. This legacy also explains why modern societies still maintain unequal reproductive opportunities. Despite technological, economic, and social changes, those with power, wealth, and status still have more opportunities to marry and reproduce, similar to Neolithic hypergamy. This is a clear demonstration that social and evolutionary choices from the past continue to influence contemporary social structures and male genetic composition. Another notable aspect is the long-term impact of the bottleneck and reproductive choices on Y chromosome diversity and cultural dominance. As weaker lineages disappeared, strong lineages dominated not only genetically but also culturally. They became centers of power, shaping political, economic, and cultural norms, and defining social standards across generations. This shows that cultural and biological legacies are closely linked, working together to maintain power and social structures extremely effectively. The Neolithic cultural legacy also includes mate selection patterns based on status and wealth, recreated in modern societies through hypergamy, cross-class marriage, and the preference for wealthy or powerful partners. This demonstrates that social evolutionary mechanisms persist not only in genes but also in social values, norms, and behaviors, creating a sustainable loop between reproductive choice, power, and culture. The profound consequence is that this cultural legacy shapes how societies organize power and reproductive opportunities. Male authority, strong clans, inheritance rights, and mate choice continue to interact, creating unequal opportunities, preserving power, and maintaining the dominance of strong lineages both genetically and socially. This clearly demonstrates that the Neolithic bottleneck was not only a biological event but also a cultural milestone shaping human society. Looking at the whole picture, the cultural legacy from 8,000 years ago represents a chain linking power, resources, reproductive choice, and social norms, where male authority is reinforced, strong clans expand influence, and marital and inheritance principles persist. These patterns explain why modern societies still prioritize individuals with power and resources in marriage and reproduction, and demonstrate that cultural and genetic legacies coexist, interact, and are inseparable. From here, we are ready to enter the concluding section, where the story of the past is synthesized and connected directly to the present, prompting reflection on how the social and biological mechanisms humans created can continue to influence humanity in the future, and whether a modern bottleneck could occur if social, power, and reproductive choices continue to operate under the same principles. As we have journeyed from the bottleneck 8,000 years ago, through women's mate choices, the rise of patrilineal clans, hypergamy, and down to the genetic consequences and cultural legacy extending into the modern era, a comprehensive picture emerges, one of both awe and gravity. The past is not merely memory, but continues to live and operate in our present. What happened millennia ago is preserved not only in the branches of the Y chromosome, but also in social structures, marital rules, power dynamics, and the ways people choose partners today. The story of the past shapes the present in ways few notice, yet its force is undeniable. The male bottleneck 8,000 years ago was not a random biological catastrophe, but a product of social systems created by humans themselves, where power, wealth, reproductive choice, and hypergamy converged to shape genetic lines and social structure. This demonstrates that human evolution is influenced not only by nature or disease, but also by social decisions, power dynamics, and individual behaviors. Even today, these mechanisms persist. Power and resources still open reproductive opportunities, powerful clans continue to expand influence, and the principles of mate selection based on resource provision remain. A critical aspect is the continuity of social and genetic selection mechanisms. From the Neolithic to the present, women's silent reproductive choices created reproductive skew, hypergamy, and the contraction of the Y chromosome. These mechanisms exist not only in genes but also in cultural rules, social norms, and family structures, forming a self-reinforcing loop between social choice and genetics. This loop has shaped the distribution of male power, inheritance of wealth and authority, and the maintenance of unequal reproductive opportunities. This story also reminds us of the power of individual choice in evolution. A seemingly small personal act, deciding whom to marry or choose as a partner, can become a potent selective force, determining the fates of millions. Over millennia, these individual decisions accumulate, producing profound changes in both genetics and society. Today, although society has more egalitarian mechanisms, the underlying principles persist. Power, wealth, and status still determine reproductive opportunities and social influence. A deeper consequence is the intimate link between biology and culture, where past and present are inseparable. The current impoverishment of the male Y chromosome is a biological record, but also a testament to social choices made across millennia. The cultural legacy from the Neolithic, male power, patrilineal clans, marriage patterns, and hypergamy, remains embedded in modern society, shaping how humans organize communities, choose partners, and distribute power. Past and present are tightly connected, creating a continuous flow in which ancestral decisions still influence contemporary life, social structures, and reproductive opportunities. An important point not to overlook is the repeatability and resilience of social mechanisms. Mate choice patterns, hypergamy, and powerful clans can recur across different social contexts, even in modern societies with advanced technology and economies. This raises a pressing question. Could a modern bottleneck occur, where power, wealth, and social choices again conspire to determine genetic lines? This is not merely an academic question, it is a warning about the potential for contemporary social mechanisms to create extreme evolutionary events, much like those of the past. The story of the past also teaches a lesson about human power and responsibility. Decisions, behaviors, and social systems we create do not only affect the current generation, but can shape biological and social futures for millennia. Power is not merely possession or status, it is the capacity to make long-lasting differences in lineage and social structure. Even seemingly minor individual choices, who is chosen, who is excluded, can become factors in global evolutionary change. This demonstrates that human history never truly ends. The bottleneck 8,000 years ago is not a closed chapter, but a current that continues to flow through both genetics and society. Male Y chromosome impoverishment, patrilineal power structures, hypergamy, and mate choice persist today, merely changing form across eras. Past and present form a continuous chain, where each generation is shaped by prior decisions, while simultaneously shaping future opportunities. The ultimate consequence is awareness of the relationship between humans, society, and evolution. The bottleneck was not just a genetic event, but proof that society, power, and individual choice can shape evolution. It reminds us that evolution is not only driven by nature, but also by human behavior and the social structures we build. Understanding the past helps us recognize the power of social behavior, prompting reflection on how we organize power, choose partners, and create survival mechanisms for the future. This story also underscores the importance of recognizing recurring patterns in society and genetics. History shows that reproductive choice, power, and hypergamy can repeat, forming reproductive skew and long-lasting impacts on the male Y chromosome. Awareness of this is not merely historical knowledge, but a tool to evaluate, anticipate, and, if necessary, adjust modern social mechanisms to prevent repeating bottlenecks in the future. Ultimately, this conclusion emphasizes that the past is not only memory, but a tool shaping the present and future. The bottleneck 8,000 years ago, mate choice, male power, hypergamy, genetic consequences, and cultural legacy are all interconnected pieces, forming a comprehensive picture of how humans, society, and evolution interact. By understanding the past, we not only explore history, but also recognize our power, responsibility, and capacity to shape the future. And in this light, the final question emerges. With current social systems and power structures, could a modern bottleneck occur, and how might we guide the flow of evolution and society more wisely? The story of the past, therefore, continues to write itself in every gene, every clan, and every social decision of the present, reminding us that all behaviors and choices have the potential to leave deep imprints on human history, not only in genetics but also in culture, society, and the evolutionary future of our species. And that is the story, both shocking and haunting. 8,000 years ago, seemingly private choices made by women triggered a massive evolutionary filter, wiping out 90% of men from history. It was not natural disasters, nor wars, but silent decisions made within the context of society, power, and survival, leaving a profound mark on both our genetics and culture. Today's video not only takes you back into the past, but also shows the deep connection between individual choice, social power, and the flow of evolution, a picture both awe-inspiring and unsettling. This story makes us ask, if social mechanisms, power structures, and reproductive choices operate as they do today, could a modern bottleneck occur? The traces from 8,000 years ago remind us that the past never truly ends. It lives on in every decision, every behavior, and every social system surrounding us. Keep following the channel to uncover more evolutionary mysteries, little-known stories with a profound impact on our lives, where past and present are intricately linked in every heartbeat of humanity.